The day the aliens came to Earth was supposed to be the greatest moment in human history. Commander of the Galactic Council descended from the sky in a ship made of light and metal that hummed with energy humans could not understand. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 arms that moved with grace. His eyes were large and kind, the color of a sunset on a summer evening. Ambassador Jake Collins stood at the landing site with his team, his heart beating fast in his chest. He had trained his whole life for this moment. He had learned 6 languages, studied cultures from every corner of Earth, and spent years preparing for the possibility that humanity was not alone in the universe. Now that possibility had become real. "Welcome to Earth," Jake said, his voice steady even though his hands were shaking. "We are honored to receive you." Commander smiled, or at least made an expression that seemed like a smile. "The honor is ours, Ambassador Collins. Humanity has shown great promise. Your species has passed the tests required to join the greater galactic community. We are here to begin the process of welcoming you." The news spread across the planet within hours. People celebrated in the streets. Scientists wept with joy. Religious leaders spoke of new chapters in the story of creation. For one brief moment, humanity forgot its wars and divisions and looked up at the stars with hope. The first week went well. The delegation toured major cities. They visited the United Nations headquarters in New York, where they addressed the assembled leaders of Earth. They marveled at human art in the museums of Paris. They listened to orchestras in Vienna and watched children play soccer in the streets of. They seemed pleased with everything they saw. Counselor was part of the delegation. She was different from the. Her body was covered in a hard shell that shimmered with colors that changed when she moved. She had wings folded against her back and large compound eyes that could see things humans could not. She belonged to a species called the, and she served as an observer for the Galactic Council. Was quiet during most of the tour. She watched and listened and said very little, but her eyes missed nothing. She noticed how humans treated each other. She noticed the homeless people sleeping on the streets. She noticed the pollution in the air and the plastic in the oceans. She made notes but kept her thoughts to herself. On the 10th day of the visit, the delegation traveled to a small town in the middle of America. It was a simple place with farms and churches and schools. Jake had chosen it to show the aliens that humanity was not just about big cities and famous landmarks. He wanted them to see ordinary people living ordinary lives. The tour went smoothly until they passed a large building surrounded by tall fences and barbed wire. The building was gray and plain, with small windows and heavy doors. Guards stood at the entrance, and cameras watched from every corner. Stopped walking. Her wings began to vibrate slightly, making a soft buzzing sound. Her compound eyes focused on the building with an intensity that made Jake uncomfortable. "What is this place?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that Jake could not identify. Jake hesitated. He looked at Dr. Emma Wright, the child psychologist on his team. She had been brought along to answer questions about human development and education. Now she looked as nervous as he felt. "That is a juvenile detention center," Jake said carefully. "It is a facility where young people are held when they have broken the law." The translator device took a moment to process his words. When it finished, went completely still. Her wings stopped moving. The colors on her shell faded to a dull gray. "Young people," she repeated slowly. "You mean children?" "Yes," Jake said. "Teenagers mostly, some younger." Turned to face him directly. Her compound eyes seemed to pierce right through him. "You are telling me that human society takes children and puts them in cages, that you imprison your own young." Jake felt sweat forming on his forehead. "It is not exactly like that. These are young people who have committed crimes. Some of them are dangerous. The system is designed to. The system is designed to punish children for the failures of adults," interrupted. Her voice was no longer calm. It was sharp and cold. "This is what you are telling me." Commander moved closer. His kind eyes had changed. Now they looked troubled, confused, almost frightened. Ambassador Collins, please tell me there has been a translation error. Please tell me that your species does not truly hold children responsible for crimes. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He looked at Emma, hoping she could explain better than he could. She stepped forward, her face pale but determined. Commander, Counselor, I understand your concern, Emma said. But you must understand that Earth is a complex world with many different cultures and systems. The juvenile justice system exists because some young people commit serious offenses. We try to rehabilitate them, to help them become better members of society. Made a sound that the translator could not process. It was somewhere between a hiss and a cry of pain. Rehabilitate them, by locking them away from their families, by putting them behind walls and fences and guards. This is not rehabilitation. This is cruelty. She turned to Commander. I must report this to the Council immediately. This changes everything. Commander nodded slowly. His forearms hung at his sides, limp and defeated. Yes, I am afraid it does. Jake felt his heart sink into his stomach. The greatest moment in human history was falling apart before his eyes, and he did not know how to stop it. Please, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. Let us explain. Let us show you why these systems exist. There is context you are missing. Looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was sad rather than angry. Context. Ambassador Collins, there is no context in the universe that justifies the imprisonment of children. Every species in the galactic community knows this. It is the most basic truth of civilization. Children are sacred. They are to be protected and guided, not punished and locked away. She spread her wings slightly, and for a moment Jake could see how beautiful they were, covered in patterns that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Your species has much to answer for, she said quietly. I only hope for your sake that you can provide answers the Council will accept. She turned and walked back toward the transport ship, leaving Jake and his team standing in the shadow of the juvenile detention center, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The children inside the building had no idea that their existence had just changed the fate of humanity among the stars. They sat in their cells, ate their meals, attended their classes, and counted the days until their release. They did not know that beings from distant worlds were now debating whether humanity deserved to join the galactic community or be left alone in the darkness of space. Somewhere in the building, a 12-year-old girl named Lily stared out her small window at the sky, dreaming of a better life, unaware that her story was about to become the most important story on Earth. The news reached the Galactic Council within hours, sent her report through channels that moved faster than light, carried by technology humans could not begin to understand. By the time the sun set on Earth, representatives from over 40 species had begun gathering for an emergency tribunal. The council chamber was located on a space station orbiting a distant star. The station was ancient, built by a species that had died out long before humans learned to make fire. Its halls were vast and filled with light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The air was adjusted to support dozens of different life forms, a careful balance of gases and temperatures that allowed beings from across the galaxy to breathe and speak and exist together. High Arbiter N presided over the tribunal. He was a being made of living crystal that had grown and evolved over thousands of years. His body was translucent, and inside it colors swirled and shifted like thoughts made visible. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the chamber like the deep notes of a massive bell. We are gathered here to address a matter of the highest concern, N announced. The species known as humanity, recently discovered on the planet called Earth, has been found to engage in practices that violate the most sacred laws of civilized society. Specifically, they imprison their children. A wave of reaction rippled through the assembled representatives. Some made sounds of disgust, Others shook their heads or equivalent body parts. A few simply stared in disbelief. The delegation sat in the far corner of the chamber. They were large reptilian creatures with scales the color of dark metal and eyes that glowed with inner fire. They were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors who had conquered entire star systems. Yet even they looked disturbed by what they had heard. General, the commander, leaned forward in his seat. Are we certain this report is accurate? Perhaps the translator made an error. Perhaps the humans meant something different. Stood to respond. Her wings caught the light as she moved, casting rainbow shadows across the floor. There was no error, General. I saw the facility myself. I saw the walls and the fences and the guards. I scanned the building and detected dozens of young humans inside, some no older than 10 of their years. They are kept in small rooms with locked doors. They are separated from their families. They are treated as criminals. The chamber fell silent. On every world represented in that room, children were considered sacred. It was not a matter of debate or opinion. It was simply the truth that held civilizations together. A child could not be held responsible for its actions because a child's mind was still growing, still learning, still becoming what it would eventually be. To punish a child was to punish the future itself. A representative from the beings made of pure light who communicated through patterns of color, pulsed with deep blue sadness. Their translator spoke for them. How can a species capable of reaching the stars not understand this basic truth? How can they build machines that touch the heavens while treating their young with such cruelty? Ambassador Jake Collins had been brought to the tribunal to speak for humanity. He stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by beings that made him feel very small and very young. Dr. Emma Wright stood beside him, her face pale but her eyes determined. Honored representatives, Jake began, his voice echoing in the vast space. I ask that you allow me to explain the circumstances that led to these practices on Earth. N's crystal form flickered with impatience, but he nodded. You may speak, Ambassador, but I warn you that no explanation can justify what we have learned. Jake took a deep breath. Earth is a young world. We have only recently begun to understand ourselves and our place in the universe. Our societies developed in isolation from each other, and we made many mistakes along the way. The juvenile justice system is one of those mistakes, but it did not come from cruelty. It came from fear and confusion. He paused, gathering his thoughts. On Earth, some children grow up in terrible conditions. They are abandoned by their parents. They are abused and neglected. They go hungry and cold and afraid. Some of these children, in their desperation, turn to crime. They steal to eat. They fight to survive. And sometimes they hurt others. Emma stepped forward to continue. Our societies did not know how to help these children. We did not have the resources or the knowledge. So we built systems to contain them, to separate them from the people they might hurt. It was wrong. We know that now. But it was not done out of hatred for children. It was done out of failure to protect them in the first place. N's colors shifted to a deep, troubled purple. You speak of failure, Dr. Wright, but failure does not excuse cruelty. When a child is suffering, the answer is not to punish the child. The answer is to heal the child and fix the society that allowed the suffering to happen. You are right, Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. You are absolutely right, but we did not know that. We did not have examples to follow or teachers to guide us. We were alone in the darkness trying to find our way. A long silence followed her words. The representatives looked at each other, communicating in ways that humans could not perceive. Finally, General stood. His massive form cast a shadow across the chamber floor. I have something to say. All eyes turned to the commander. His species was known for violence, not compassion. What could he possibly contribute to this discussion? Long ago, began, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder, though we're like these humans. We too punished our young for the failures of our elders. We too built prisons for children. We thought it made us strong. We thought it taught discipline and order. He paused, and for a moment his glowing eyes seemed dim with old pain. It nearly destroyed us. Our children grew up angry and broken. They became soldiers without mercy, leaders without wisdom. We conquered worlds but lost our souls. It took us 1,000 years to learn what every other species in this chamber knew from the beginning. Children are not the problem. Children are the solution. How we treat them determines what we become. He looked directly at Jake and Emma. I do not speak to defend humanity. I speak to say that I understand them. They are young and foolish as we once were. The question is not whether they have done wrong. They have. The question is whether they can learn to do better. The chamber was silent as his words settled over the assembly like falling leaves. For the first time since the tribunal began, there was something other than anger and disgust in the air. There was something that felt almost like hope. N's colors shifted again, this time to a thoughtful shade of gold. The speaks wisdom, but understanding is not the same as forgiveness. Humanity must answer for what they have done, and they must prove that they are capable of change. He turned his crystalline gaze to Jake and Emma. You have one opportunity to show us who you truly are. Use it wisely. Jake felt the weight of an entire species resting on his shoulders. He did not know if he was strong enough to carry it, but he knew he had to try. We will, he said quietly. Whatever it takes, we will show you. The tribunal was far from over, but for the first time, the door to redemption had opened just a crack. Now humanity had to find a way to walk through it. The tribunal gave humanity 3 days to prepare their testimony. Jake Collins spent those days without sleep, working with his team to find the right words, the right witnesses, the right way to explain something that could not truly be explained. Dr. Emma Wright traveled back to Earth through the faster-than-light transportation the provided. She had one mission, to find people who could speak the truth about the juvenile justice system, not the official truth that politicians told on television, the real truth that lived in the hearts of those who had experienced it. When the day of testimony arrived, the chamber was full. Every species in the Galactic Council had sent representatives. They sat in tiers that rose high above the floor, watching with eyes and sensors and organs humans did not have names for. The air was heavy with expectation. Jake stood at the center of the chamber and spoke. Honored representatives, I could stand here and give you statistics. I could show you charts and reports and official documents, but numbers cannot capture the reality of what happens to children on Earth. So instead, I have brought witnesses who will speak from their own experience. I ask only that you listen with open minds and open hearts. The first witness was a man named Carter. He was 43 years old, with gray in his hair and tired lines around his eyes. He had worked in juvenile detention for 20 years. I started this job because I wanted to help kids, said, his voice rough with emotion. I grew up poor. I got in trouble when I was young. A good teacher saved my life by believing in me when nobody else did. I wanted to be that person for other kids. He looked around the chamber at the alien faces watching him. But the system does not make it easy to help. There are too many kids and not enough staff, not enough money, not enough time. We are supposed to rehabilitate these children, but we barely have resources to keep them safe. I have seen kids come in scared and broken, and I have seen them leave even more damaged than before. Paused, struggling to control his voice. I am not here to defend the system. I am here to tell you that many of us who work inside it know it is broken. We fight every day to make it better, but we cannot do it alone. We need help. We need resources. We need people to care about these kids as much as they care about keeping them locked away. The chamber was quiet when he finished. No one spoke or moved. The second witness was a young woman named Sophie Martinez. She was 26 years old, with long dark hair and eyes that had seen too much pain for someone so young. I was locked up when I was 14, Sophie said. My crime was stealing food from a grocery store. My mom had left us. My dad was in prison. I had 2 little brothers who had not eaten in 3 days. So I stole bread and peanut butter and milk. The store owner caught me and called the police. She took a shaky breath. The judge said he was giving me a chance to learn right from wrong. He sent me to juvenile detention for 6 months. 6 months away from my brothers who ended up in foster care. 6 months in a place where I was surrounded by kids who had done much worse things than steal food. 6 months of being told I was a criminal, a delinquent, a problem to be solved. Sophie's voice grew stronger as she continued. But here is the thing the judge did not understand. I already knew right from wrong. I knew stealing was wrong. I did it anyway because my brothers were hungry, because nobody else was going to feed them, because the world had already failed us 100 times before I ever walked into that store. She looked up at the assembled aliens. I am not here to say I was innocent. I am here to say I was a child who needed help, not punishment, a child who was punished for trying to take care of other children. Is that justice? Is that how a civilization should treat its young? The silence after her testimony was deeper than before. Some of the representatives had begun to understand something they had not grasped at the beginning. The problem was not simple. The problem had roots that went deep into the soil of human society. The third witness was brought in by special arrangement. She was small for her age, with brown hair that had been hastily brushed and eyes that seemed too old for her young face. Her name was Lily, and she was 12 years old. Jake had argued for hours to make this happen. Many on the council had objected, saying it was cruel to put a child before such an assembly. But Jake knew that nothing he could say would have the same impact as letting the council see and hear one of the children they were discussing. Lily stood in the center of the chamber, looking very small and very alone. But her voice, when she spoke, did not shake. "My name is Lily," she said. "I do not really understand what is happening here or why there are so many strange creatures looking at me, but they told me to tell my story, so I will." She paused, gathering her courage. "My mom left when I was 6. I do not know why. I just came home from school one day and she was gone. No note, no goodbye, nothing. The neighbors called someone and I got put in foster care." Lily's voice was flat, like she was reading a report about someone else's life. "I went to 7 different homes in 6 years. Some were okay, some were bad. One was really bad, but I do not want to talk about that. I ran away a lot. I got in trouble a lot. I stole things because sometimes I did not have food or clothes or anything. I hit a kid once because he said something mean about my mom." She looked down at her feet. "That is why I am locked up now, for hitting that kid. I broke his nose. I did not mean to hurt him so bad, I just got angry. I get angry a lot. The counselor says it is because of all the stuff that happened to me. She says I have trauma. I do not really know what that means. I just know I feel bad most of the time and I do not know how to make it stop." When she looked up again, there were tears on her cheeks, but her voice stayed steady. "I am not a bad person. I am just a kid who had bad things happen to her. I do not want to hurt people. I want to go to school and have friends and maybe have a family someday. A real family that does not leave or hurt me. Is that too much to ask for?" The chamber was utterly silent. Then, from the high tier where they sat, came a sound that no human had ever heard before. High Arbiter N was weeping. His crystal body resonated with frequencies that made the air itself shimmer with grief. Colors poured through his form in waves of blue and violet and silver, the colors of sorrow in his ancient species. Other representatives joined him. The pulsed with deep indigo light. The bowed their heads. Even General of the closed his glowing eyes, his massive claws clenched tight against old memories. Lily did not understand why all these strange creatures were crying. She did not know that her words had changed something in the hearts of beings who had watched stars form and die. She only knew that for the first time in a very long time, someone was listening to her. And that perhaps was enough. Emma Wright stepped forward and gently put her hand on Lily's shoulder. "Thank you, Lily. You were very brave." Lily looked up at her with those old eyes in that young face. "Did I help?" Emma felt tears running down her own cheeks. "Yes, sweetheart, I think you helped more than you will ever know." The testimony was over. Now the council would decide the fate of humanity, and somewhere in that decision, the fate of Lily and every child like her hung in the balance. The council took a full day to deliberate. During that time, Jake Collins and his team waited in a small room adjacent to the main chamber. They did not speak much. There was nothing left to say. They had made their case, and now the fate of humanity rested in hands that were not human. Emma Wright sat with Lily, who had been allowed to stay rather than return immediately to Earth. The young girl was confused by everything that had happened, but she seemed calmer than she had in a long time. Something about speaking her truth to the universe had lifted a weight from her shoulders. "Dr. Wright," Lily asked quietly, "do you think those alien people will help us?" Emma looked at the child who had stood before ancient beings and spoken with more courage than most adults could manage. "I hope so, Lily. I really hope so." "They seemed sad when I talked," Lily said. "Like they understood. Nobody ever understood before." Emma put her arm around the girl's thin shoulders. "Sometimes it takes an outsider to see what those closest to a problem cannot see. Maybe that is why this happened. Maybe the universe sent them to us because we needed help seeing ourselves clearly." The door opened, and an attendant gestured for them to return to the chamber. The deliberation was over. The decision had been made. The chamber was full again, every seat occupied. The air was thick with tension that seemed to have weight and texture. Jake walked to the center of the floor with Emma and Lily beside him. He stood straight and tall, prepared to accept whatever judgment the council had reached. High Arbiter N rose from his seat. His crystal form was calm now, the colors inside him shifting in slow, peaceful patterns. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but carried clearly to every corner of the vast room. "The council has reached a decision regarding the species known as humanity," he announced. "But before I share that decision, I wish to speak of what we have learned during these proceedings." He paused, and his colors deepened to thoughtful shades of amber and gold. "When we first learned of humanity's treatment of its children, we were horrified. We saw monsters. We saw a species that had failed to grasp the most basic truth of civilized existence. We were ready to condemn you, to leave you in isolation until you destroyed yourselves as so many young species do." Jake felt his heart beating hard in his chest. Beside him, Emma gripped his hand tightly. "But then we listened," N continued. "We heard from those who work within your broken systems, fighting every day to help children despite overwhelming obstacles. We heard from those who survived those systems and found the strength to heal and grow. And we heard from a child who stood before us with more courage than many warriors I have known." He turned his crystalline gaze toward Lily, and something like warmth glowed in his ancient form. "That child taught us something we had forgotten. She taught us that judgment without understanding is just another form of cruelty. She taught us that even the darkest circumstances can produce light." The chamber was perfectly silent as he continued. "Humanity is not a species of monsters. Humanity is a species of children themselves, young and lost and struggling to find their way in a universe they do not understand. They have made terrible mistakes, but those mistakes came from ignorance and fear, not from evil." He raised one crystalline arm and light gathered around it like a beacon. "The Council does not condemn humanity to isolation. Instead, we offer something that has not been offered to a species in 10,000 years. We offer our help." A murmur of surprise rippled through the chamber. Jake felt his legs go weak with relief. He had prepared himself for the worst, and instead he was hearing something he had not dared to hope for. Counselor stood, her wings spreading slightly behind her. "We offer our healing technologies. We have developed methods to repair the psychological damage caused by trauma and neglect. These technologies are not magic. They require time and effort and commitment, but they can help wounded children become whole again." Commander of the Rose next. My people offer our educational systems. We have learned that the key to preventing harm is teaching children from the earliest age about empathy, about consequences, about their place in the community. We will share these methods with humanity. The representative pulsed with bright colors as their translator spoke. We offer our resources to eliminate the poverty that drives so many human children to desperation. No child should ever have to steal food to survive. This is a solvable problem, and we will help solve it. One by one, species stood and made their offers. They offered their wisdom, accumulated over millions of years. The silicon-based offered technologies that could build homes and schools and community centers with incredible speed. Even species that rarely spoke in council sessions came forward to pledge their support. Then generals stood. The chamber fell silent. They were known for conquest, not charity. What could they possibly offer? My people know what it is to walk the path humanity now walks, said, his deep voice filling the chamber. We know the pain of looking back and seeing the damage we have done to our own young. We also know the joy of healing that damage and becoming something better. His glowing eyes found Jake's. They do not offer technology or resources. We offer something more valuable. We offer ourselves, our counselors, our teachers, our healers, who have dedicated their lives to understanding how a species can change. They will come to Earth and work alongside humans for as long as it takes. Jake felt tears streaming down his face. He made no attempt to hide them. Beside him, Emma was weeping openly, and even Lily had begun to cry, though she probably did not fully understand why. But N was not finished. His colors shifted to serious shades of deep blue. This help comes with one condition. Humanity must release every imprisoned child within one standard year, not transfer them to different facilities, not rename the system. Release them, every single one, and in their place, you must build systems that address the true causes of the problems you face. Jake nodded, his voice choked with emotion. We accept. On behalf of Earth, we accept. N's form brightened with something that looked like hope. Then, let this day be remembered. Let it be remembered as the day humanity stopped punishing its future and started nurturing it. Let it be remembered as the day you began to become what you were always meant to be. He struck his crystalline arm against the podium, and the sound rang through the chamber like a bell, announcing a new dawn. This tribunal is concluded. The work of transformation begins now. Lily tugged on Emma's sleeve. Does this mean I get to go home? Emma knelt down to look the girl in the eyes. It means you get to go somewhere better than home, sweetheart. It means you get to go somewhere you will be safe and loved and helped to heal. It means the universe has decided that you matter. Lily thought about this for a moment. Then, for the first time in years, she smiled. It was a small smile, hesitant and unsure, but it was real. And in that smile was the beginning of everything humanity would become. 5 years passed like a dream that slowly becomes real. The changes on Earth began small and grew until they touched every corner of human society. The juvenile detention centers were emptied within the promised year, their gray walls repainted in bright colors, their cells converted into counseling rooms and classrooms and spaces where children could heal. Alien ships arrived carrying teachers and counselors and healers from dozens of worlds. They came not as conquerors or judges, but as friends who had walked difficult paths themselves and wanted to help others find easier ones. Warriors who had once burned cities now sat with traumatized children, sharing stories of their own painful journeys from violence to peace. Healers used their strange and beautiful technologies to help wounded minds rebuild themselves. Educators taught human teachers new ways of reaching children who had been failed by every system that was supposed to protect them. The poverty that had driven so many children to desperation began to fade. Resources built homes for families who had none. New programs ensured that no child would ever have to steal food to survive. The foster system was transformed from a temporary holding place into a network of real families who were trained and supported, and given the resources they needed to care for children who were not born to them but were loved by them just the same. Not everything changed overnight. Some people resisted. Some politicians called the alien help an invasion. Some communities clung to old ways because change is always frightening, even when it is necessary. But slowly, year by year, the resistance faded as people saw the results. Children who had been labeled criminals became artists and scientists and teachers. Neighborhoods that had been torn apart by violence became peaceful. The cycle of hurt that had passed from generation to generation began to break. Lily was one of thousands of children whose lives were transformed by what happened in that council chamber. After the tribunal, she was placed in a special program designed by counselors who understood trauma in ways human psychologists were only beginning to learn. She was given a home with a family that had been carefully chosen and thoroughly trained. She was given therapy that helped her understand why she felt so angry all the time and taught her how to feel other things instead. It was not easy. There were bad days when she screamed and cried and said she hated everyone. There were nights when she woke up shaking from dreams about the foster home that had been really bad, the one she did not like to talk about. There were moments when she wanted to give up, to believe what she had always believed about herself, that she was broken and bad and beyond help. But she was not alone anymore. When she fell, there were hands to catch her. When she stumbled, there were voices to encourage her. When she forgot that she mattered, there were people and beings from distant stars who reminded her again and again until she finally began to believe it herself. On her 17th birthday, Lily received news that changed her life for the second time. She had been chosen by her peers, the children who had once been imprisoned and were now healed and thriving, to serve as humanity's youth ambassador to the Galactic Council. She stood on the deck of the starship Endeavour, looking out at stars she had once dreamed about through the tiny window of a detention cell. She was not that broken little girl anymore. She was something new, something the universe had helped her become. Jake Collins stood beside her, older now, with gray in his hair but a peace in his eyes that had not been there 5 years ago. "Are you ready?" he asked. Lily smiled. It was not a small, hesitant smile anymore. It was the smile of someone who had learned that she had value, that her voice mattered, that her story could change things. "I have been ready my whole life," she said. "I just did not know it." The council chamber had not changed much since her first visit. It was still vast and filled with that strange light that seemed to come from everywhere. But Lily was different now, and so she saw it differently. It was not frightening anymore. It felt almost like coming home. She walked to the center of the floor where she had once stood as a confused and frightened child. Now she stood as a representative of her species, chosen not despite her difficult past, but because of it. High Arbiter N was still there, his crystal form glowing with colors that Lily had learned to read over years of communication with alien species. He radiated warmth and welcome, and something that looked very much like pride. "The Council recognizes Lily, Youth Ambassador of Earth," he announced. Lily looked around at the assembled beings. Was there, her wings shimmering. General sat with his delegation, his glowing eyes soft with something that might have been affection. Representatives from dozens of worlds watched her, waiting to hear what she would say. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "5 years ago, you asked humanity a question. You asked if we were mental for imprisoning our children. The answer was yes. We were. We were lost in our own fear and ignorance, hurting the ones we should have protected, punishing the future we should have nurtured." She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly. "But you did something remarkable. When you saw our shame and our failure, you did not turn away. You reached out. You offered help instead of judgment. You showed us what we could become instead of condemning us for what we were." Lily's voice grew stronger as she continued. "I stand before you as proof of what that help can accomplish. I was a child who had been thrown away by her own world. I was angry and hurt and convinced that I would never matter to anyone. But you changed that. You showed me that every child matters, no matter where they come from or what has been done to them. She looked directly at N. You taught us that a civilization is measured not by how it treats its strongest members, but by how it protects its most vulnerable ones. Humanity has learned that lesson. We are still learning it every day, and we will keep learning it for as long as we exist. Lily spread her arms wide, encompassing the entire chamber. Humanity is ready now, ready to join you not as the broken species you first encountered, but as partners who understand the sacred responsibility we all share, ready to learn from you and someday to teach others what we have learned. She smiled, and in that smile was everything she had overcome and everything she hoped to become. And when another lost species stumbles into this community carrying the weight of its own mistakes, we will be there. We will reach out our hands as you reached out yours. We will offer help instead of judgment, because that is what the universe taught us to do. The applause that followed was unlike anything Lily had ever heard. It rolled through the chamber like thunder, like music, like the voice of the stars themselves, celebrating the transformation of a species that had once been lost and was now found. When it finally faded, N rose and spoke words that would be recorded in the histories of 1,000 worlds. Let the records show that on this day, humanity's designation is officially changed from under observation to protected ally, emerging wisdom. Let it also show that this change was earned not through conquest or technology, but through the courage of a child who was once imprisoned and is now free. Lily felt tears on her cheeks as the chamber erupted in celebration once more. But these were not the tears of the broken girl she had once been. These were the tears of someone who had found her place in the universe. She looked out at the stars visible through the chamber's great windows and thought of all the children back on Earth who were being helped right now, in this very moment. Children who would grow up knowing that they mattered. Children who would never have to stand alone in the darkness as she once had. That was worth more than all the stars in the sky. That was worth everything.